Hi, in this video we're going to look at a few sample sentences and identify prepositional phrases, verbs, and subjects. With each example, we're going to begin by identifying the prepositional phrases because we know that the verb of a sentence and the subject of the sentence cannot appear inside a prepositional phrase. So we can find the prepositional phrases and then just ignore that part of the sentence so that we can focus on finding our essential parts, the verbs and the subjects. So if we look at this first example here, several of my friends work at the mall on weekends. We're going to start by looking for prepositional phrases. So we notice here the preposition of. So if we ask of what or of who? Of my friends. So that is how we identify the prepositional phrase. It begins with the preposition, and a prepositional phrase always ends with a noun or pronoun. So of my friends is a prepositional phrase. If we continue with the same sentence, at is also a preposition. So our prepositional phrase begins with the preposition at, and it ends with a noun or pronoun. So if we ask at what, at the mall. So that's where the prepositional phrase ends. We have one more preposition, on, and if we ask on what, on weekends. So that prepositional phrase ends with the word weekends. So if we notice, once we've found those three prepositional phrases, we actually only have two words left in this sentence. So our next step is to look for the verb. That's our action word, and in this case, it's the word work. So I'm going to double underline that. Work is our verb. And then we're going to ask, okay, who works? Well, our subject is several. Several of my friends work at the mall. So several is our subject. Okay, this might be a little bit confusing because we know that what we're talking about is some of my friends, several of my friends. But structurally, in terms of the grammar of the sentence, of my friends is part of a prepositional phrase, so we know that the subject cannot be inside a prepositional phrase. So our subject here is several. Subjects, again, must always be either a noun or pronoun. So let's look at another example. The janitor used a polishing wax in the scrub water. So we'll start again by looking for prepositional phrases. Here we have the preposition in. So that's where our prepositional phrase begins. And if we ask in what? In the scrub water. So that's where our prepositional phrase ends. That's our only prepositional phrase in this sentence. So we're going to take a look and look for our verb. What is our action word in this sentence? It is used. Used is the verb. So I'm going to double underline that. Okay, used is the verb. And then we're going to ask who used. Who was the person who used the polishing wax? Well, the janitor. So janitor is the subject of the sentence. So one thing I want to point out is this word here, polishing. So polishing, if we think about it, is generally an action, and verbs that end in ing can be verbs, but they're only acting as a verb in the sentence if they come with a form of the verb to be. So I'll just add a different example here. If we said, he was polishing, and continue on from there, then we have a form of to be. And in this case, was polishing would be the verb. So whenever we have a verb ending in ing, it's only actually acting as a verb in the sentence if it comes with some form of to be. So that was just a little bit of extra information about that one. So let's look at example 3 here. Each of Jim's daughters has a phone in her room. So again, we're looking for prepositional phrases. We've got our first preposition of, so we'll put parentheses to begin that prepositional phrase there. And of what or of whom? Of Jim's daughters. So that's where our prepositional phrase ends. Again, it always ends in a noun or pronoun. Jim's here is just a possessive telling us whose daughters we're talking about. And we also have the preposition in. So our prepositional phrase begins with in, and if we ask, in what? In her room. So that is where our prepositional phrase ends, with the noun room. So now we're looking for our verb. What is the action in this sentence? In this case, it is the verb has. So has is our verb. It's our main verb in the sentence in this case. Has is one of those verbs that can either act as a helping verb or as a main verb all by itself. In this case, it's the only verb, so it's acting as the main verb. So who has a phone? Who possesses the phone? Each. So each is our subject in this sentence, so we'll underline each. So this one is similar to number one in that it might be a little bit confusing. We know we're talking about Jim's daughters, but that piece of the sentence of Jim's daughters is part of a prepositional phrase. So grammatically, each, the pronoun each, is our subject of the sentence. So we'll look at one more example, number 4. My nephew has decided to quit his job at the music store. So we have the preposition at. That begins a prepositional phrase, and if we ask at what? At the music store. So we know that our prepositional phrase ends after the noun store. And then I want to point out here, to is often a preposition. However, in this case, it's actually part of an infinitive verb. Right here, to quit is an infinitive. Anytime we have to plus a verb, it is considered an infinitive verb. So it's not the verb of the sentence, nor is it a prepositional phrase. So I just wanted to point that out. We can actually just completely ignore that. I'm just going to cross it out, because we know that an infinitive verb is not the verb of the sentence. So we need to find our verb. We have this action here, decided. That's part of the verb. And notice that it has a helping verb, has. So our complete verb is has decided. So I'm going to double underline that. Has decided is the complete verb, comprised of the helping verb has and the main verb decided. And who has decided? Nephew. Nephew is the one. He's the one who decided. So that is our subject of the sentence. So as you can see with all of these examples, it really helps to follow this order to identify the prepositional phrases first. That really takes a lot of the sentence out of the picture. Then we can try to find the verb and then try to find the subject from there.